Sci-fi, horror, fantasy, absurdism in the extreme. It's all available here in the Tales from the Omni Vault book series. Check the description for Amazon links so you can get your copies and start reading today. Thank you all, and now, on to the video. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the Omni Viewer, and we're a few episodes into Ultraman arc at this point, and I feel like I can make a pretty good assessment of what kind of show it is and whether or not you should check it out. So, what I'm going to say up front is that, as I've mentioned in the past, it does have a certain familiarity to it. It feels like it's harkening back again to earlier forms of Ultraman, or a more traditional form, you might say, where it's relatively self-contained. It's a very much Monster of the Week series that has the Ultra character come in when he's absolutely needed. Each new episode has an interesting monster and spotlights a particular member of the kaiju hunting/fighting team. But the way in which it goes about is sort of in this interesting zone. Like, in terms of writing, I don't think it necessarily does anything stellar. That's not to say it's bad, mind you. I'm just saying that it doesn't necessarily do that much in terms of being experimental, you might say, in terms of pushing the boundaries of what an Ultra series can be like. And I think that is deliberate. Like I said, it's traditional, but that doesn't mean it's bad. I think Tsuburaya Productions knows that Ultraman's popularity is growing internationally, and they want it to grow internationally, which is why this is one of those Ultra series that is actually being used to promote their English dub specific YouTube channel. It still airs with a multilingual option on their original Japanese channel, but there is an English dub specific channel that it's also going up on with the English dub specifically, so that English speakers in places like here in America can watch it and not have to worry about the subtitles. So in that regard, I think the decision was made very intentionally to keep it like what you'd expect an Ultra series to be. As such, it does follow a very particular formula and can serve potentially as a good entry point for the series. But it's also, again, clearly putting a bit more of an emphasis on being like all ages, but certainly favoring younger ages specifically. Like I said when I reviewed the first episode, Ultraman arc clearly is meant more for kids than it is for everyone, which is what the Ultra series has generally tried to do. By which I mean, it was made with kids in mind, but it didn't condescend to kids, which meant it could be enjoyed by an older audience. However, some shows skew more towards being for kids than others, and there are some shows that are meant specifically for adults, but those are very rare exceptions. Arc seems to be in that realm of mostly for kids, but if you're an adult, it's not like you're gonna get nothing out of it. And you know what? I repeat what I said in that first episode review. If it is predominantly meant for kids, and the kids are getting something that's relatively good quality, that's a positive thing. I don't care if it's not something that's specifically made for me as an adult. If I can watch it and still know that there's a kid out there who's being introduced to Ultraman through this, and they're getting this good of an introduction, then I still count that as a net positive. So, ultimately, I don't care if it's more for kids than for adults, as long as it actually maintains the level of quality that the Ultra series is known for. One of the concerns that comes when a show is made for kids, though, is that it might be made as a toy commercial, which is a problem the Ultra series has suffered from as of late. The Bandai mandates are what cause them. Bandai develops this new Nerf-style toy, not specifically Nerf, but like it's a toy sword or a toy bow and arrow, toy blaster, whatever, And they basically tell Tsuburaya Productions, we're footing the bill for your show, so you gotta work this in. And they basically say, well, yeah, if we have to maintain the deal, I guess we do have to work it in. But it's kind of hurt the shows as of late. That changed with Blazar, where, from what I've heard, they started producing the show before Bandai could come in with the mandates, and they were just like, oops, sorry, not sorry, but we already started the show, so guess you can't really force us to have that many toys, can you? And Bandai said, well, I guess for the most part you're right, though you do still have to work this sword in somewhere, okay? Alright, fair enough. It's not like Ultras haven't had swords before. Arc, when I first saw those ads, made me wonder if it was going to be back to business as usual. I think I can safely say that while there is a toyetic quality to how Ultraman Arc functions, it doesn't feel like it's pandering. It doesn't feel like it's advertising. See, stuff like the transformation device, that's pretty standard. And yeah, it's a bit more complicated than your average Ultra transformation capsule, wand, whatever. But you know, it's not like that's not expected. You incorporate those things in all the time. But what about the other things? Because he's got a sword, and he's got two different sets of armor. The power of the sun and the power of the moon. Now, yes, I do believe those were incorporated as toy-specific things, but they are incorporated naturally. The sword he has from episode 1, and it just feels like that's part of his power set. The way it's introduced, the way it's handled, it's just one of the things he uses. We've officially had one of the armors introduced as of this video's posting. It's the Power of the Sun armor. And the way it's incorporated feels kind of like what previous Ultra shows did. If you've seen Tiga, Dyna, Nexus, or Cosmos, one of those kinds of shows, the Ultras in those series had the ability to basically change colors. And whatever color they were dictated certain power sets. It started with Tiga, where his regular form is silver with red and purple incorporated in. If he shifted to all red, that meant he was stronger but slower and he was grounded. But if he shifted to all purple, he could fly and was much faster, but he wasn't quite as strong. And yes, that was technically done, you could argue, so that they could sell 3 different figures of Tiga for the price of one show, but it fit naturally into the series. And I think it fits naturally in here as well. The armor appears to be functioning on the same logic, it's just that instead of a color change, it's something that Arc wears. And the reason it feels natural is because of the nature of Ultraman Arc and his relationship with Yuma. It was like 3 episodes in, I believe, that we finally got an origin story. Though it was told as a flashback, and we still don't necessarily know where Arc comes from or what specifically he is. It's possible he has the standard Ultraman origin of being from Nebula M78, but the way in which he exists makes me wonder if there's something else going on. But the basic idea is that he seems like more of a metaphysical, mental being almost. A being that bonds with Yuma because Yuma specifically has a strong imagination, and it is through this imagination that Ultraman Arc is able to manifest these different weapons and upgrades and abilities. So what we're looking at here is we have an actual in-universe source for all these different quote-unquote toyetic elements, and it makes sense. It doesn't feel like it was unnatural. And it also contains kind of a positive message in its own right, because it's all about unleashing the imagination. Arc is able to do all of these different things because Yuma's imagination allows him to do it. And if you think about it, isn't that kind of what A.G. Tsuburaya did, especially when he made Ultraman? He unleashed his imagination and came up with one of the most iconic pieces of Japanese media out there. more popular in some ways than Godzilla at times. So I think that if Eiji Tsuburaya were alive today and he saw this particular element of Ultraman arc, he would appreciate that aspect of it, that it's encouraging the use of imagination. Particularly, like, that makes Yuma sort of a role model for kids and a glimmer of hope for adults in some ways. Because, you know, kids, they're always told, use your imagination, let it run wild and be creative. Once you turn into an adult, that expectation, for whatever reason, goes away. But here we see a character who certainly was shown to have a big imagination as a kid. He's now a young adult. I don't think his age has been specified as yet, but he's living on his own. He's got a job. For all intents and purposes, he is functionally an adult. But his imagination is still his greatest asset. It's the most important thing about him that allows him to make a huge difference. And especially in the artistic world, that is a big deal. So I can certainly laud the show for that. So like I said earlier, Ultraman arc is pretty traditional in terms of plots. But when it comes to the visuals and the special effects, unleash your imagination is the key phrase. Ultraman arc has been doing stuff with its visuals that I've never seen done in the kaiju genre before. Not even in animation, not even in Pacific Rim, which was the first work that really pushed the boundaries. It's really running wild. You may recall, like, the first episode had the fight done in one take, or at least in the illusion of one take. If you know what to look for, you know where they cut it up, but it still all blends together. And you also had stuff like a shot inside the building, going up floor by floor, and having people inside the building as Ultraman is rising up outside of the building. But that's just continued. The second episode actually had 2 POV shots during the fight. That's point of view, if you somehow forgot that. One from Ultraman arc's point of view, and one from the monster's point of view, which again, isn't something I've really seen done in the series before. The flashback episode had these really interesting edits as Arc and his opponent, Diegolos, I believe it was, are having this battle in the city, and it's almost like it's intentionally disorienting as Ultraman's bursting through buildings and lasers are going off everywhere. It's almost hard to describe in a way, but it's like I said, it feels like it's meant to be deliberately disorienting, where you think you're looking at something only for it to turn out to be something else. This latest episode didn't necessarily push boundaries in that regard, but it still did something really creative by having the rat monster Nezatron have a cable run out of his body and attach him to the building he burst out of. So while he is able to move around, his range of motion is actually limited at a certain point, which is, again, not something I've seen done all that frequently. So even when it's going a bit more standard, it's still finding a way to shake things up. This means Ultraman arc exists in sort of this weird area where, on the one hand, it's average, on the other hand, it's revolutionary, and those two are constantly intersecting throughout the series run. So it's definitely an interesting watch. And yeah, I do think it is worth watching at this point. Again, we're only a few episodes in at this point. It could still take a downward turn, but I think the quality right now is strong enough that it can be maintained throughout. I think the crew knows what they're doing with this. And there are hints of a larger plot running just beneath the surface that's going to come into fruition as the series draws towards an end, which Blazar did, and did quite well. So hopefully Arc can pull that off as well. But if you've been wondering if Ultraman Arc is really worth it, then I would say yeah. Especially if you have kids that you want to introduce to Ultraman. This, after something like Ultraman Rising, is a good way to get them into what the original Ultraman is like. So yeah, at this point, Ultraman Arc has my recommendation. It just needs to keep the momentum going. Until such time as we meet again, This is the Omni Viewer signing off.